I never expected my life to be defined by someone else's mistakes, yet here I am, staring down the dim hallway of my small house, my nephew's boy asleep upstairs, and the echo of a vanished woman still lingering in every corner. 6 years ago, she left him in my care, vanished into the night, and never looked back. I didn't even know if she was alive, or if she'd ever return. And now, suddenly, she was coming back, her eyes on something far more dangerous than a lost child, too. 8 million she believed was hers. I'm not a hero, never was. My name is Michael, and life has a way of shaping you into what necessity demands. My sister had been dead for years, my nephew's father taken in a freak accident, and suddenly responsibility fell on me, on a man who barely knew how to care for himself, let alone another human being. I wasn't equipped for this, not emotionally, not financially, not spiritually. But there I was, making breakfast at 6 a.m., quietly plotting how to make the little boy smile before school. I've always been observant. Some call it being nosy, I call it survival. People leave clues in their habits, their expressions, the way they fidget. 6 years of raising a boy who wasn't mine had sharpened my senses. Every laugh, every tear, every hesitant question from him felt like a window into a world I didn't belong to but couldn't leave. I knew the value of vigilance because life had taught me that trust is a currency far more fragile than money. Most mornings I'd sip black coffee, watch the light stretch across the peeling linoleum, and wonder how anyone could abandon a child without conscience. Sometimes I'd catch myself imagining the woman who left him, imagining her excuses, her fear, her selfishness. I hated her in those quiet moments, but I also knew hatred was useless unless it served a purpose. Survival alone isn't enough. You have to be strategic. I wasn't naive about money or family disputes either. I'd watched relatives tear themselves apart over land, inheritance, and titles. I knew that too. 8 million wasn't just cash, it was power, leverage, and temptation wrapped into one. And I had to protect what was mine, not just legally, but morally. That boy was mine to protect, and anyone who returned for the money would have to reckon with me first. By the time the sun fully rose, painting the room in harsh light, I felt the weight of the years pressing down on me. Responsibility, grief, anger, and a knowing curiosity about her disappearance had all fused into a single, quiet determination. If she thought she could waltz back into my life, she was in for a lesson she wouldn't forget. I looked up at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the plaster, and whispered to myself, no one takes what's mine, not without consequences. And just like that, the first shadow of my revenge took root. It was a gray afternoon when the call came. My heart skipped before I even answered. Her voice, the same one I hadn't heard in 6 years, slithered through the receiver, polished, calm, confident. Nothing of the guilt or fear I expected. Michael, she said casually, as if the years of absence were a mere pause in her life. I need to see my son. I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. She didn't say my son, she said her son. That tiny, almost imperceptible choice of words was a dagger. My blood turned cold. I'd raised that boy, changed his diapers, kissed his scrapes, stayed awake through fevers that left me feeling hollow with exhaustion. And she, the woman who'd abandoned him, dared to return and claim him like he was a possession waiting for her signature. You left him with me, I said carefully, controlling the tremor in my voice. 6 years. He's my responsibility. Her laughter, light and cruel, slithered into the line. You think this is about responsibility? Michael, don't be naive. You know why I'm back. That money. It's mine. Everything else, just details. It hit me like a punch to the chest. The boy wasn't the prize, he was a pawn. 8 million. The fortune that had been tangled in wills, trusts, and family disputes. She didn't care about the boy. She cared about leverage, about taking what she wanted, and leaving the emotional wreckage for someone else to clean up. For a moment, I just stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, my mind spinning. Memories of the past 6 years flashed before me, first steps, first words, first heartbreaks. All of it, hers to claim now if I faltered, and that laugh, like venom, reminded me of the power imbalance she thought she had. She underestimated the years I'd spent watching, learning, waiting. You're not walking back into this house without a fight, I said finally, my voice low but resolute. Not for him, not for the money, not for anything. Her voice softened just slightly, a calculated mimic of concern. We'll see, Michael. Things change. People change. Maybe we can come to an understanding. I hung up before I could respond. I knew what understanding meant in her vocabulary. It meant manipulation, threats, and emotional blackmail, the very weapons she had honed over the years to bend those around her to her will. And now she was trying them on me. I stared at the empty hallway where he slept, feeling the weight of the injustice settle over me. The betrayal wasn't just hers, it was the system, the family, the twisted sense of entitlement that let her think she could return and take what she had abandoned. And just like that, the calm, ordered life I'd built with him fractured. I realized then, with a cold, sinking clarity, she had underestimated me. And underestimation, I thought grimly, is the first mistake an enemy makes. I couldn't sleep that night. The house was quiet, the boys' soft breathing drifting up from the second floor, and yet my mind was a storm. Anger, fear, resentment, doubt, all tangled together, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. Part of me wanted to call her back, to plead for understanding, to reason like a civilized human being. Another part, the sharper, darker part, wanted to make her pay for every sleepless night, every milestone she had abandoned, every tear I had wiped from that boy's cheek as if they were my own. But I couldn't let emotion rule me. I had to be precise. Revenge isn't about noise, it's about strategy. I walked to the kitchen and poured a drink, the liquid burning a path down my throat. I caught my reflection in the window. The man staring back was older, warier, but there was a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there 6 years ago. That hardness had grown from grief, responsibility, and betrayal, and now it was ready to serve a purpose. I thought about the boy, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. He was mine. Every memory, every lesson, every laugh we shared had built a bond that couldn't be erased by her return. And yet, I worried. What kind of man would I become if I let hatred consume me? Could I balance justice and morality while plotting the downfall of someone I once cared about, someone who was now my enemy? The internal conflict was suffocating. Part of me feared that revenge might change me irrevocably, that I could become the very person I despised, manipulative, cold, and unfeeling. But the other part whispered truths I couldn't ignore. She had stolen 6 years from me, 6 years from him, and she believed she could walk back in unscathed. She didn't just underestimate me, she disrespected everything I had built in her absence. That I could never forgive. I replayed our conversation in my head, word by word, tone by tone. I realized how skillfully she had hidden the malice behind a veneer of civility. Every sentence was calculated to unsettle me, to make me doubt my own authority, my own worth. She had perfected the art of emotional manipulation, and I had to match it, step by step, thought by thought. And yet there was a part of me that mourned her absence, not for her, but for what could have been. A family together, a life shared, milestones celebrated. That life had been stolen, and it hurt. The betrayal cut deeper because it wasn't just abandonment. It was theft of a future I had never consented to lose. By the time dawn crept through the blinds, I had made a silent vow I would protect the boy. Yes, but I would also reclaim control. Not in anger, not in blind retaliation, but with intelligence, patience, and precision. My enemy believed she held the power. Soon she would discover that power had shifted, and I had been waiting in the shadows all along. I spent the next few days in a silent war with myself and the world. Every step she might take, every word she could speak, I anticipated. Revenge isn't impulsive, it's meticulous, like a chess game played against someone who thinks they know the board. And she had no idea I had already been setting pieces in place for years. I started by gathering information. Public records, social media, old family contacts, all breadcrumbs that could reveal her motives, her network, and her weaknesses. I watched her digital footprint like a hawk, noting patterns, the lawyer she preferred, the charity galas she attended, the restaurants she frequented. She was careful, polished, predictable in her precision. Yet, everyone leaves a trace. Everyone makes a mistake if you wait long enough. I also reviewed the estate documents, wills and trusts tied to that $8 million. Legal jargon can be a labyrinth, but I had patience, and patience is a weapon. I traced every signature, every clause, every contingency. She might have assumed she could waltz in and claim her prize, but I had built my own fortress around it. This wasn't just about money. It was about leverage, influence, and demonstrating that betrayal has consequences. At home, I rehearsed interactions with her. I imagined the lines she might use, the subtle manipulations she might attempt. I practiced responses, calm, measured, but cutting beneath the surface. Emotional control was my armor. She would try to rattle me, I would be immovable. I also considered the boy. He couldn't know the storm brewing just beyond the door. My love for him was both a shield and a sword. Protecting him meant hiding my plans, concealing the fear and fury that threatened to spill over. He needed stability, routine, reassurance. I had to be both guardian and strategist simultaneously, a balancing act that demanded every ounce of my mental energy. Nights became my planning hours. I pored over every detail: phone records, bank statements, legal loopholes, psychological tactics. I built scenarios. What if she tried to charm me? What if she threatened me? What if she tried to turn the boy against me? For every move she could make, I had 10 counter moves, each designed to maintain control without revealing the extent of my preparation. It was exhausting. And yet, in the exhaustion, I found clarity. Every betrayal leaves a mark, but every mark can be used, every weakness exploited, every opportunity seized. I realized that revenge isn't about the first blow, it's about creating a web where your adversary becomes entangled by their own miscalculations. By the end of the week, I had a plan, not just to protect the boy, but to ensure she never underestimated me again. The pieces were on the board, my mind sharpened, my resolve hardened. The stage was set, and I knew, deep down, that she wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. The first move is always the quietest. People expect revenge to announce itself, to slam doors, raise voices, draw blood. But real revenge slips in unnoticed, like a change in air pressure before a storm. That's how I wanted it. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I let her think she was winning. I returned her calls, politely. I agreed to meet her lawyer. I even suggested we talk like family. Every word I spoke was measured, every pause deliberate. I could almost hear her confidence growing on the other end of the line, mistaking my calm for weakness. Our first meeting took place in a glass-walled conference room downtown. She walked in dressed sharp, eyes alert, smile rehearsed. When she saw me, her expression softened just enough to look sincere. It was the same face she'd worn 6 years ago when she left her son at my door and promised she'd be back soon. "Michael," she said, sitting across from me, crossing her legs slowly. "You look tired." I smiled faintly. "Raising a child will do that." Her lawyer slid documents across the table, claims, timelines, polite threats disguised as legal language. I let them talk. I nodded. I asked harmless questions, and all the while I watched her. The way her fingers tightened when the trust was mentioned. The flicker of irritation when I didn't react. She wanted control. She wanted fear. I gave her nothing. What she didn't know was that, 2 days earlier, I'd already triggered the first safeguard. A clause buried deep in the trust, one she'd clearly forgotten, required proof of consistent parental involvement for any claim tied to guardianship leverage. 6 years of absence doesn't disappear just because someone suddenly remembers their rights. My attorney had already submitted the necessary filings. Quietly, legally, permanently. When the meeting ended, she leaned toward me, lowering her voice. "You don't have to make this difficult. You took care of him. Fine. But now it's time to let go." That was when I felt it, the shift. Not rage, not fear, certainty. "I didn't take care of him," I replied calmly. "I raised him. There's a difference." Her smile faltered for half a second. That was all I needed. Over the next week, subtle consequences began to surface. Her accounts were flagged for review. Her legal timeline slowed. Old associates stopped returning her calls. Nothing dramatic, just enough friction to unsettle her rhythm. She was used to momentum, to things moving when she applied pressure. Now everything stalled. She called me late one night, her voice tight. "What did you do?" I looked at the stairs leading to the boys' room and answered honestly. "I protected what's mine." I hung up before she could respond. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because I knew now this wasn't a fight anymore. It was a lesson unfolding exactly as planned. The calm I had maintained for weeks shattered the moment she realized patience wasn't on her side. She came to the house one evening, her steps deliberate, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood as if announcing a march of authority. But this time, she wasn't smiling. This time, there was anger, raw, unpredictable, desperate. I met her in the living room. The boy was upstairs, playing quietly, oblivious to the storm gathering below. She looked around, scanning the modest furnishings, the walls filled with pictures of him growing up, milestones she had missed, every birthday, every scraped knee, every graduation of small victories. Her gaze lingered on him, not with warmth, but with entitlement. "You can't keep him forever," she said, voice steady but brittle. He's mine. You don't have the right. I cut her off, voice low and controlled. He's mine to protect. You lost that right 6 years ago. Every day I raised him. Every night I stayed awake with him. Every sacrifice I made. It wasn't yours to claim. Her hands trembled slightly as she gestured toward the door. This isn't about the boy. You know that? It's about the money. The $8 million. You think I won't fight for it? I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension fill the space between us. You can fight. You can threaten. You can try to manipulate everyone you know. But I've already made sure every step you take will be met with resistance. Legally. Strategically. Emotionally. You underestimated me from the start, and that mistake is going to cost you. Her face hardened. She lunged forward, pointing at me, voice rising.
You can't stop me!
I didn't flinch. Instead, I let her fury speak for her, revealing the cracks in her control. Every shout, every accusation, every attempt to assert dominance showed me exactly where she had vulnerabilities. Emotional manipulation, pride, fear of losing face. I cataloged each one silently, like a predator circling prey. Then came the revelation, the moment I had been waiting for. In her tirade, she let slip a secret. She had manipulated family members into supporting her claim, secretly promising them portions of the inheritance, lying to everyone to paint me as the villain. That was her undoing. Because I had already recorded and documented these attempts, every lie she told, every scheme she wove, now became her weakness. I calmly reached for my laptop and slid it across the table. Everything you've done, everything you've said to others, it's all here. Every lie, every scheme. You left a trail of breadcrumbs straight to yourself. Her eyes widened, the veneer of control cracking. For the first time in years, she was visibly afraid. Her confidence, carefully constructed, collapsed under the weight of evidence she couldn't erase. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten further. I just sat back, letting silence fill the room, letting her realize the extent of her overreach. The $8 million, the boy, the trust she thought she could reclaim. It was all slipping from her grasp. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't expected, the satisfaction of a plan executed with precision, the bitter triumph of justice served without violence, the subtle but unmistakable power of strategy over impulse. The calm I had maintained for weeks shattered the moment she realized patience wasn't on her side. She came to the house one evening, her steps deliberate, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood as if announcing a march of authority. But this time, she wasn't smiling. This time there was anger, raw, unpredictable, desperate. I met her in the living room. The boy was upstairs, playing quietly, oblivious to the storm gathering below. She looked around, scanning the modest furnishings, the walls filled with pictures of him growing up, milestones she had missed, every birthday, every scraped knee, every graduation of small victories. Her gaze lingered on him, not with warmth, but with entitlement. You can't keep him forever, she said, voice steady but brittle. He's mine. You don't have the right. I cut her off, voice low and controlled. He's mine to protect. You lost that right 6 years ago. Every day I raised him, every night I stayed awake with him, every sacrifice I made, it wasn't yours to claim. Her hands trembled slightly as she gestured toward the door. This isn't about the boy, you know that. It's about the money. The $8 million. You think I won't fight for it? I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension fill the space between us. You can fight. You can threaten. You can try to manipulate everyone you know. But I've already made sure every step you take will be met with resistance, legally, strategically, emotionally. You underestimated me from the start, and that mistake is going to cost you. Her face hardened. She lunged forward, pointing at me, voice rising. You can't stop me! I didn't flinch. Instead, I let her fury speak for her, revealing the cracks in her control. Every shout, every accusation, every attempt to assert dominance showed me exactly where she had vulnerabilities. Emotional manipulation, pride, fear of losing face. I cataloged each one silently, like a predator circling prey. Then came the revelation, the moment I had been waiting for. In her tirade, she let slip a secret. She had manipulated family members into supporting her claim, secretly promising them portions of the inheritance, lying to everyone to paint me as the villain. That was her undoing, because I had already recorded and documented these attempts. Every lie she told, every scheme she wove, now became her weakness. I calmly reached for my laptop and slid it across the table. Everything you've done, everything you've said to others, it's all here. Every lie, every scheme, You left a trail of breadcrumbs straight to yourself. Her eyes widened, the veneer of control cracking. For the first time in years, she was visibly afraid. Her confidence, carefully constructed, collapsed under the weight of evidence she couldn't erase. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten further. I just sat back, letting silence fill the room, letting her realize the extent of her overreach. The 2.8 million, the boy, the trust she thought she could reclaim, it was all slipping from her grasp. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't expected, the satisfaction of a plan executed with precision, the bitter triumph of justice served without violence, the subtle but unmistakable power of strategy over impulse. The house was quiet again. The boy laughed as he chased sunlight across the living room floor, his small hands clutching a toy airplane. I watched him, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. 6 years of sleepless nights, of fear, of uncertainty, had led to this. A moment of calm where our lives were finally ours. She never returned for him after that last visit. The $2.8 million remained untouched, locked away behind legal safeguards, irrelevant now compared to what truly mattered. She had learned, the hard way, that no amount of money could replace years of absence, that manipulation only works on those unprepared to see through it, and that true responsibility isn't claimed, it's earned. I often think about the man I've become. Patience, vigilance, and calculated action became my allies. Revenge, when executed wisely, isn't about cruelty, it's about justice, protection, and restoration of balance. I didn't need to humiliate her publicly or destroy her life violently. I needed to ensure she understood, profoundly, that betrayal has consequences, and that some debts aren't measured in dollars but in time, trust, and loyalty. The boy doesn't remember the fear, the quiet battles, the emotional games that were played behind closed doors. He only knows that I am here, that I care, and that he is safe. And in protecting him, I protected myself, from bitterness, from despair, from allowing a life defined by others' selfishness to dictate my own. Sometimes, in the evenings, I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and let the past wash over me. I think of her, not with hatred, but with acknowledgement of what she taught me about vigilance and human nature. Life rarely deals fair hands, but we can control how we respond. We can turn betrayal into clarity, anger into purpose, and loss into resilience. I have no illusions about life being peaceful forever. But I have a foundation I can trust, a child I can protect, and a mind sharpened by experience. And that, I realize, is the true inheritance. Not the millions, not the fleeting power, but the wisdom to recognize betrayal, confront it, and emerge intact. Some lessons aren't learned gently. Some battles aren't fought visibly. But the victory, the quiet, enduring kind, is far sweeter than any headline, any fortune, or any fleeting triumph. Moral reflection, true resolution comes not from revenge alone, but from growth, wisdom, and the courage to protect what truly matters. Life rewards those who act with patience, strategy, and moral clarity.